Hello, welcome to. We were going to put our guest in the green room real quick. Welcome to the Seeking Heaven channel. And tonight we have a very exciting live chat, which I was trying to be secretive, put our guest in the virtual guest room. So great, we are live as 22 seconds ago. So I am Tamara Caulder Richardson. I'm a 6-time near-death experiencer, an afterlife speaker, as well as an evidential medium. And tonight we have an expert. NDE researcher who is also a family doctor and an MD, and has done over 4,000 studies or 4,000 subjects on the topic of near-death experience. And of course, if you haven't seen the interview before this, he really goes into a very in-depth PowerPoint presentation on the near-death phenomenon, and really has dedicated his whole life. And I'm going to bring him on, but I'm talking about Dr. Jeffery Long. And like I said, he is an MD, but he is also a radiology oncologist, and he lives in Louisiana. And he's here with us tonight for the live chat. So as I'm talking, start getting your NDE and Afterlife and Heaven questions ready. He is also an author of Evidence of the Afterlife, as well as other books that he has written, which we will talk about. And he is also in charge of the Afterlife, After Death Research Communications Foundations. He actually has a lot of foundations he's founded. I'll let him tell you about that. But you probably have seen him on major networks like NBC, ABC, O'Reilly. He's been with Peter Jennings on the ABC show, Dr. Asha, the History Channel, the Learning Channel, National Geographic. And I know the latest thing that he's done has been on Inside Edition. And he said that went really well. Of course it would, because this is a very interesting topic. So he is joining us tonight, and I am bringing on Dr. Jeffery Long.
Well, hi, it's a pleasure to be here. Good evening.
Evening. Thank you for being here. I tell you what. Okay, we've already got people in our chat room, but before we, great, fantastic. So we've already got people coming in saying hello to you. They're popping in. And they're excited. So we have Susan, and then we also have, I believe this is Sharon. Oh, that's sweet. Okay, you're welcome. People are they're very excited about this topic, and then of course Clay is here saying hello. So they'll start popping in, and we'll start getting questions. But talk about first. Now, you did this large study, but the study kind of still going on, because you were telling me that you have this massive global website where the information is kind of like a portal comes in, and then you have they write out the description of what type of near-death experience they have. So you're still getting that data, correct?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. We have portions of the website that we use for research, NDERF, standing for the Near-Death Experience Research Foundation, that's .org. It's been translated into over 30 different languages. So we have near-death experiences and other experiences being shared from all over the globe. Just this weekend, I'm going to be analyzing our non-Western near-death experiences. And remarkably, we have, I just found out this week, 168 of them. So we'll have by far the largest study of non-Western near-death experiences that's ever been reported coming up by the end of this weekend. So it's been very exciting. We keep doing research actively and finding some very interesting stuff.
So, and that's what's exciting to me. I mean, I don't want to leave you in the past. It's not like you did it and you're done with it. You're
Yeah.
still, oh yeah, right. You know, and I hate that sometimes, even with like near-death experiencers, they talk about the incident like, and it could have been 30 years ago. And I'm like, no, we're still kind of, we're still alive. We're still doing things. So this research that you're doing now, where do you think, and I'm just curious myself, where do you think, and hi, Shell, number one truth seeker, people are showing up. They were real excited about you tonight, so they're popping in like crazy. So tell us the research that you've done on the near-death experience. And again, you can see the whole thing on the interview beforehand, where Dr. Long goes into, breaks it down on the PowerPoint. But what, after looking back on it and reflecting, and tell me, what year was this, the 4,000 subjects, what year was that finished?
Yeah. Actually, it's technically we did a recent count. It's a little over 3,500 is what we talked about video, and that's really the most accurate. That's darn close to 4,000. I started doing this research a little over 20 years ago. We set up the website and immediately had a survey for people to share their near-death experiences and complete a survey. So this has literally been a labor of love for over 20 years. We've amassed a huge amount of near-death experiences. On the website, nderf.org is by far the largest publicly accessible collection of near-death experiences in the world. If you want to see near-death experiences, in, if you will, in all their glory, the most amazing of them, you go to nderf.org, go up to the top where it says experiences, click, and go to exceptional experiences, and that'll probably knock your socks off. Those are the most
Okay.
dramatic been shared with us. So very informative. We have over 50,000 unique visitors every month. So it's literally a global outreach. We're reaching a
Oh, wow.
huge number of people and learning a lot as we go along from the research we do.
Okay, and I just wanted to kind of get a grounding, like, and then I want to get into a little bit of your books, and then we're going to really get
Mhm.
into the meat of things. So, now your research is continuing. So, what in your summary? I mean, not to summarize things, but as a reflection, looking back, what are the things that stood out to you the most from that large study? And as you move forward, what other kind of things are
Yeah.
you looking for or looking at?
Right. There's the thing that is extremely impressive to me is based on some research I did many years ago in my book, Evidence of the Afterlife, The Science of Near-Death Experiences. Continuing this research with a much, much larger pool of near-death experiences, I am even to this day in awe at the multiple lines of evidence all converging on the conclusion that near-death experiences are, in a word, real, along with their consistent message of an afterlife. And now that we've sort of, I think, me and a lot of other people reached the understanding that near death experiences are for real and offer, if you will, a window into that life after death, then we enter a very exciting era of research where
Mhm.
looking directly at near death experiences, we can start to understand something about that afterlife, what it means, what it's all about. And that's where it gets really interesting. So that's been a both continuing to look at that evidence that underlies the reality of near death experience and that newer direction, very exciting direction of starting to say, okay, if near death experiences are real and there is an afterlife, what can we say we know from near death experiences about the afterlife?
And so one of the things it kind of cracked me up last time you were talking about how you've been, I don't know, at atheist conventions or something, and about
Yeah,
how they're determined there's no heaven and this is a bunch
yeah,
of hogwash and it's the and what I hear often and sometimes it's medical people and they go and they I don't know, I don't understand it. I'm not in the medical field, but
mhm,
my sister's in the medical field, her and her husband, and she thinks this is kind of like woohoo paranormal, like you can't prove it. I said, no, no, this has been
mhm.
proven. This is a phenomena.
Yeah,
and so, and then you've got the skeptics that are just hardcore skeptics, I guess, that I guess want to just disbelieve. So I would love to hear what you tell them because you did find evidence that heaven is real.
yeah. Um, in general, physicians tend to be more accepting of near death experience and its reality than a lot of other groups because professionally, physicians have been with people that are on death's door or dying or die. And they know darn good and well that when a patient's unconscious or in a coma or clinically dead, it should be absolutely medically impossible for them to have any lucid, organized experience at that time. To
Right.
them, unconsciousness due to physical compromise is not a vague unknown concept. That's grippingly real as part of their most of their medical practice or certainly their medical training. So for physicians to understand that people really do have these lucid organized experiences while they're unconscious or clinically dead, I think doctors get that. Also,
Mm,
doctors are very inclined to understand through their own understandings of medical literature and research that underlies the decisions they make. They know darn good and well that if you have a large study and you're consistently observing an outcome, well, that's real, and that's what kind of thing they can use to assist with their medical studies. The main skeptics of near-death experience are, as you said there, Tamara, they're atheists. It's not because they have carefully studied in general near-death experience and find that the evidence is wanting. It just simply clashes with their belief, and so I have regularly debated some atheists, and I might add, I've never lost a debate, but it's been kind of fun doing that. And then I think that the great majority of people are just curious, and if they're like, geez, like I was before I started my research, I'm a show me guy. If you're going to make an extraordinary claim about life after death, about near-death experiences being real, I absolutely believe you need extraordinary evidence, and we're really way beyond that point. Not only with the research I've done, but with the research ongoing for the reality of near-death experience.
So you probably speak to a lot of doctors or medical professionals on this topic too, to educate them, correct?
Mhm.
Yeah.
I've talked at a number of grand rounds or other physician gatherings. Now, interestingly, these are what we call CME or continuing medical education events. So, as part of that, the doctors have to fill out a survey about whoever talked. And as part of the giving talks like that, I get to see what doctors actually thought. I mean, this is what they
Oh,
filled out in their survey and handed off to the CME coordinators in that hospital. And I'm astounded at how favorably physicians have looked upon this data. Once they hear about what I presented in my talk yesterday that everybody heard, physicians really know evidence. They know what's solid evidence, and they really get that. So upon hearing all that, there's a recognition, hey, there's something going on, even if that they didn't understand near-death experience before or have any kind of understanding. They do understand large studies. They understand that the basic tenet of science, and that is what's real is consistently observed. So when I've talked to groups of doctors, I've been very impressed with how well people say, I get it. There's definitely something there.
got it. Well, it's funny because I've actually when I come across any medical doctors, even my doctors, I
Mhm.
talk about this, and then they'll go kind of question. I'm like, and then I refer them to your book.
Oh, that's good. Good for you.
And then
Okay.
because they want hard science, and so
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
refer them over. Oh yeah, I do that all the time. It drives
Mhm.
my mom, I think, crazy. So I did it when I was in surgery. I was like, yeah, I had a so and so. And then afterwards, your daughter
Yeah.
had her. She goes, yeah, she'll. And then I brought him a magazine. It was an Afterlife publication. I brought it to him to look at. I thought it was kind of funny. So,
Yeah.
what have you personally gained? Because this has been a lifelong passion,
Mhm.
and what kind of, I'm curious, Dr. Jeffery Long, the man, like what really spurred you to start this whole cycle? Because you could have just gone a different way. Like what made you
Yeah.
really interested with near death experiences?
I think I've always had, well, first of all, gosh, how can one not be fascinated about that huge question? What happens when we die? So, when
Mm-hmm.
I first read the term near death experience in a prominent medical journal, I immediately stopped looking for my cancer related article, read that article about near death experience, and was amazed. So, I started reading the references in the bibliography and realized that if near death experiences were real, this changed how I looked at the universe, period, in a lot of ways. So when I heard my first in-person near-death experience shared by a wife friend several years later, I was hooked and I became convinced I've got to learn for myself personally, are near-death experiences for real? And again, being a show it to me kind of guy, being if you make an exceptional claim, you got to have exceptional evidence.
True.
That was the idea to set up the website and encourage people to share their own near death experiences and answer a survey with the question. I wasn't ready to share this with the world over 20 years ago. I just wanted to know. And
Okay.
very quickly,
Okay.
oh my gosh, Tamara, very quickly after the experiences started coming in, I was blown away. Very quickly, the remarkable consistency in these accounts, things in them that are absolutely had no possible medical explanation were very obvious. And very quickly, I realized, yes, near death experiences are absolutely real. And that became the next 20 years of my life.
So what was was it one particular story or was it a collective thing that really went, oh my gosh, life goes on. This is really real.
Yeah.
What was
It
it?
was, I think it was very early on, even before my research website, inderf.org, was posted. I was already talking about this on what was the dominant nighttime radio show back then, the Art Bell radio show. A friend
Yeah, Art
tipped
Bell.
off Art Bell that I had a physician was coming up with a website like this. And so immediately I was asked to be a guest. And so huge numbers of people would generally email or share in a variety of ways near-death experiences. So very, very quickly, and that was back in an era where they had, she's like probably close to 1 million listeners every night. So not surprisingly, very quickly, I had a very large collection of near-death experiences. So I think it was reading through all of them and finding so many of these experiences that were just mind-boggling beyond any possible explanation other than the fact that they're real, that really convinced me very quickly. It was that large amount of material I had very fast that led me to understand that near-death experiences really happen. And even at that dawn, I was thinking, wow, they're talking about an afterlife. I'm seeing that so consistently. And it's not what I thought an afterlife would be like. It's not what I was taught, not what I believed, but the evidence is as it is in the near-death experience is being very consistently expressed. And frankly, wow, that's what they're saying about an afterlife. That's really, really good news. So that got me even more. I mean, not only the concept that there is an afterlife, yeah, but something about it was amazing.
That's true. And gosh, I have so many questions, but thank you. So it was really a
Mhm.
personal, like, and you're right. And, we all have this human body, so it doesn't matter what profession you're in. I mean, you'd think people would want to be curious, like, where do we go
Mhm.
after this? So,
Mhm.
now we've got a question here from ES, which is sharing matter is neither created nor destroyed. Okay, can a statement that can be backed by near death
Yeah.
experiences? Could that be the bridge between science and spirit, or what is the bridge with science and spirit on this topic?
Yeah, that's a matter can is neither created nor destroyed is an absolute fundamental truth in the physical universe we live in. One thing that's obvious is that the afterlife realm, overwhelmingly consistent described in near-death experiences, is not a physical realm. Time essentially does not exist the way we know it. Uh, Movement is non-physical. Sensory awareness, communication is typically or almost exclusively telepathic. Vision is non-physical. It's analogous to vision the way we know, but it seems to be more like a mind sight type of thing. But what exists in the afterlife is overwhelmingly, consistently a non-physical realm. And so, as a result of that, I think it gives us a bridge to the physical realm that we exist with. Matter is not created or destroyed, and yet certainly in this unearthly realm of the afterlife described in near-death experiences, there's a similar concept. I mean, there seems to be a powerful creative force. Things can be creative, but it isn't destroyed. So it's that's one thing you have to remember when you read near-death experience accounts. It's easy to try to conceptualize that in terms of the physical universe we live in, but overwhelmingly quickly you see that this is completely different from the physical earthly life that we have here in many, many ways.
So that leads to this question: in visiting your site, what characteristics of the
Mhm.
NDE experience
Yeah.
lead you to define as exceptional? And for
Mhm.
me, I was wondering if you could start with, a lot of people just don't know. They hear the near death experience. So many people are, it's a big topic these days,
Mhm.
and not everybody has the white light going to the God realm, whatever you want to call it. Some people just have an out
Mhm.
of body experience, and
Mhm.
maybe that's why you started your OBE
Mhm.
foundation. But maybe talk about the
Mhm.
differences and what constitutes a higher level near death
Sure.
experience. Yeah,
Mhm.
that'd be great.
All near death experiences that are shared with are exceptional. There's no doubt about that. I am still greatly appreciative and in awe of each and every near death experience we get, whether it's very brief or whether it's very detailed. But we have a duty to, if you will, share these experiences with the world in a way that the most detailed, the most informative, the near death experiences that you can learn the most about do come along. They're very uncommon, but we categorize them as exceptional because we think they're especially informative about near death experiences in general. So we value and love all near death experiences,
Yeah.
but you just have to go look at that list of exceptional near death experiences, boom, 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 and I will bet you that if you know how doctors don't guarantee anything, this doctor's going to guarantee you this. If you read just literally 20 or especially 30 of those exceptional near death experiences, you are going to have a very deep understanding about near death experience in general, and it could literally change your life with the astounding information that is so consistently seen there in these experiences.
So now and if you could you mind, and we have a beautiful person here who is a near death experience I'm going to pull up in a minute, that was just on the show. Incredible story. So I'm so excited he's here for you. But could you give maybe some bulleted points, or what are the exceptional? And again, every story is important because it builds a bigger story. I understand.
Yeah. The exceptional near-death experiences are the exceptionally detailed one. As you mentioned, Tamara, it's not unusual to have that close brush with death. You're unconscious. You're typically at first thing that occurs, or often does, in a near-death experience, consciousness separates from the physical body, typically going above the body. From that vantage point, they can see ongoing earthly events, which may include frantic efforts at others trying to resuscitate them. And that's the out of body experience. And for many near death experiences, that occurs, or maybe a few other things, but that's it. But if it's exceptional, they may travel into an unearthly realm. They may communicate with other spiritual beings. They may directly come to understand, either through questions or what they're told, some profound spiritual wisdoms. They may come to have some awareness during their near-death experience, information they could not possibly have known. For example, highly evidential near-death experiences are what we put into the exceptional list. So things that just basically are informative, not just for the near-death experiencer, but really for everybody, and valuable information to help them understand, if you will, the bigger picture.
Okay, so it resonates on a higher level with it's more of a God thing. It sounds like the
Well,
information can help everybody. So
yeah.
we have here a question from David Ditchfield, and he had a near death experience accident with a train. He was recently on here, and he has a book, Shine On, which I do want to talk about the after effects, because he received beautiful after effects of music and art. But he has a question here, and thanks for being here, David. It's so nice to have you here. Hey, kisses. Okay, so wanted to ask, in your research, when NDEs report seeing a tunnel of white light, which is the most common interpretation of like, okay, let me make a comment footnote first.
Mhm.
I hear about that too, and I'm with you. I'm with you, brother. I saw what David saw, and it wasn't white light. It was what he painted, and it's the first time I've ever seen it. And we'll talk about that. But maybe talk about this tunnel and the light.
Mhm. Okay. Well,
Good
good
question.
question, David. I would point out that in the Journal of Near Death Studies that came out just several weeks ago, there was an individual who analyzed the narrative comments, the narrative descriptions of a near death experience on our website, over 500 of them, and found the two most common words used as a descriptor of their own near death experience was light and love. So light is certainly very important in a near-death experience. Light can be variable. It's typically white, but not necessarily. Uncommonly, people have recorded seeing lights that are all colors of the rainbow. When people see light, often at the end of the tunnel, it's often referred to as a mystical, unearthly light. In other words, we in our earthly life are aware of light, but this goes way beyond that. What people encounter in near death experiences, especially when they're through the tunnel and they're not seeing or being aware of light for ongoing earthly events. Now, many researchers have talked about the fact that people interpret this light as being a religious being or God or some other thing, and that's just bunk. I can tell you, unformed light is light. If light forms a being, it's danged obvious it's a being. They've got like head, shoulders, legs, and they communicate. So really give near-death experiencers their credit. They know darn good and well the difference between light and a formed being, or specific beings that it formed, whether it's a loved being that they knew during their earthly life that died. Even deceased pets have been found fairly commonly reported in near-death experiences. We got your dog, cat, horses, birds, you name it. So, and that's not amorphous light. So in general, when they see light, however, it can absolutely be amorphous, not definitely formed. It's not at all unusual that when they see that light, they feel that there's a persona to the light, even if it's not manifesting itself. It's not at all unusual. They feel a very strong sense of love with that unearthly light. The light may be bright. We've had people call it like a million times a million suns, and yet it never hurts their eyes in the near-death experience. Which, don't forget, they don't have physical
Yeah, they
eyes.
don't have eyes.
They don't have either unconscious, not seeing the damn
Right,
thing.
right.
So that's a good question about a little bit about light and near-death experience. Is very often a very powerful part of the near-death experience, with that sense of love, connection, and there's more to it, and often a gateway to other aspects of the near-death experience.
Well, and you're right. I hear that a lot too with people.
Mhm,
And the darkness, when I saw the tunnel, it was just a perception of a
mhm,
tunnel. I don't know if it's a tunnel, it
mhm.
could have been a portal. I don't know what it was,
Yeah.
but it wasn't scary. It just felt
Mhm,
comforting. So we
mhm,
have here from Yes, that's amazing. I was curious to know if anyone has reported extra senses that we
mhm.
aren't
Yeah.
aware of here. Um, well, I mean, as I guess abilities, I think that's
Mhm.
what's going on here. And I did
Oh,
mention that that David
okay.
came back with, he never had it before, and he came back and it's really
Yeah.
advanced.
Okay.
So, maybe
Yeah.
that about
Extra
after
senses.
effects.
That was my research in the last weekend. We have now a small series. So, good question. It's like, way to go. People, we have now we're about to report a small series of people that were severely visually impaired or blind. And yet, during their near death experience, they had not only normal vision, but often supernormal vision. And the one lady I interviewed, who was born totally blind and vision was unknown and unknowable to, when she had her near death experience, she had the type of vision that is often described in near death experience as being 360-degree vision. In other words, you simultaneously see in front, back, right, left, and up, down, technically spherical vision. And near death experiencers may report that as part of their supernormal sensory awareness that they have during near death experiences. By the way, this blind from birth lady, I told her that everybody else on the planet sees a pie shaped visual field. And her response was, she laughed. She said that it isn't, you can't, that's not true, because her only life experience was spherical vision. But in addition to that, we have communication, as I've said, is telepathic is the best English word for it, but it is in a near death experience an instantaneous communication of thought. The context, very rapid, very complete in terms of emotional content, and generally described as no ambiguity, no ability for misunderstanding like we have here on Earth, like even right now. But hopefully, not a lot of misunderstanding. So there's that instantaneous communication. We now have a small series of people profoundly hearing impaired or deaf, including one person totally deaf from birth. Again, they have that same telepathic awareness. They're not reading lips, they're not reading writing, and they're actually in a near death experience sharing in that telepathic way. They can have supernormal, if you will, when they're in that out of body experience. They can have that awareness of what other people are thinking, even if they're not talking. That's unusual, but it does happen. It's not unusual in near death experience to have the supernormal awareness of music that is more beautiful than anything they ever heard on earth. They may see colors in this unearthly realm, including colors that are so beautiful they literally have no descriptor or even existence in the physical earth we live in. So it's quite dramatic to see this sort of supernormal sensory awareness that is so commonly described in near death experiences.
Got it. So and that's interesting. You mentioned the colors and the
Mhm,
music because it's kind of like
mhm. Yeah.
otherworldly music. So I think those are good ones. Now, my question might seem a bit strange. What are the NDE after effects? You said normal ones meaning spiritual. I think there's some that's common to most, just
Yeah.
coming back. And then they're like, maybe they're electrical filled with, I don't know, watches or batteries, all the way to
Yeah.
the very, people that could do numbers now. What is your experience that you've seen, kind of the range, just that
Yeah.
you've seen on that?
Okay. After effects are the very typically observed pattern of changes after a near death experience. I would emphasize they may take years to fully manifest because even positive change, takes a long time for people, and especially when they're changing in ways that is so radically different from how they were before. So it's not unusual to take many years before these changes are manifest. Also notable in near-death experiences, the positive changes, continue to occur years, even decades after the experience. So they continue to be progressively strong which is a big distinguisher from other even very positive life events where the changes are less likely to occur over time. What has been seen in both retrospective and prospective studies of near-death experiences, and then most recently in my data, which I'll be doing in the next weekend or two, we see what other near-death experience researchers have observed, that being, in my study, there's an overwhelming, we asked them about their level of compassion in their earthly everyday life at the time they had their near-death experience and when they shared it, which was about all around in the range of 15 to 20 years later on the average. An overwhelming increase in their level of compassion is described. It is like triple the way having the highest level of compassion on the survey question we asked compared to where they were at when they had their near-death experience. A dramatically proportional reduced fear of death, increased belief in an afterlife. No surprise. From their point of view, they know what lies beyond death's door. They know there's an afterlife, a wonderful afterlife for them and everybody else. So no surprise they have a greatly reduced fear of death, typically a lack of fear of death and belief in an afterlife. In addition to that, they tend to be more interested in spiritual events, things in their life. They tend to be much more interested in love. They will leave unloving relationships or vocations and seek out loving relationships or vocations fairly commonly. Tamara, you mentioned a little thing about what's called electrical sensitivity.
Yeah.
It's been common for people to say they can't wear watches or computers don't work. Thank goodness we don't have that today, folks. But that's been fairly common. I hope not. So, folks, if your computer's not working, we understand. Yeah, you're all right. But anyway, that was actually a major research study on electrical sensitivity came out, and the findings were suggestive. But the researcher, I think, very appropriately from the data said we really can't be sure, and more studies needed. So it's not a slam dunk about why people have, especially near-death experiencers, are notorious for having trouble with watches. It could a partial explanation could be they just simply don't value time as much as they did before. It's part of that more ethereal, broad belief system, and they hate to be limited by time. But there's a little bit of urban legends. People used to say, "Gee, we drive along and street lights go out." Well, dudes, mercury lights, which are that yellowish lights, they can be sensitive to the shaking when a car goes by, and they can go out if they're on their last gas. So you have to be careful to separate the reality from the urban myths that have risen around that. So I think looking at my data, I think there may well be something to it, but it's not real common. And we just need more study to really nail it down. No one's been able to identify any mechanism. In other words, there's no measurable difference in, if you will, the electricity or magnetism of people. We actually look into that here with my own tri-field
Oh
meter.
my gosh, look at that.
Yeah, we
Wow.
checked that all out. So seriously, folks, I've taken this to a IONS International Association for Near Death Studies board meeting,
Really?
tried it out, and also IONS meetings. And even with this exquisitely sensitive measurement of electricity and magnetism, we haven't really been able to shake out anything by my sort of impromptu studies in that way too. But we need more research. The final word is unknown on that, in spite
So
of
I
all.
can I can see, okay, you're at a IONS conference. There's Dr. Long. What's he doing with that thing? Wait a minute, he's coming near us.
Yeah,
So
that's great. I should turn this. Yeah, all right, let's see here. Okay, well, yeah, I mean it works. There we go. Whoa, look at that. Look at the show you've got
oh
going.
yeah,
You
look
hear
at
that?
that.
You're really setting off this.
Ooh, yeah.
You're doing some pretty awesome stuff here. So I don't know if it's you or if there's somebody. Look at that. It's hard to know if it's me, you, or somebody listening. It's really got this thing humming.
Oh,
So
really? Well,
I'll
I don't
leave
know.
I'll leave you with that. I'll
That's,
bet you didn't
that's
expect
cool.
that tonight, Tamara.
It's what now? My
You didn't
camera?
expect that, did you?
No. Well, the thing
Oh,
is, no. Well, here's the thing. I'm a medium, so a lot of times I'll do things, and the recording. I actually
mhm,
did something 3 days ago, and I was being
mhm,
recorded internationally. They
mhm,
saw me. We had 6 panelists. I was one of them. I was on there. They all saw me. I saw them. It's being recorded. It was on a stream like this.
mhm.
I was the only one that was stripped out, and then my audio messed up, and it was some kind of code in
Ooh,
it. Yeah, but and then
okay.
I've had also spirit people come underneath and
Mm,
say things in video. So what does it mean?
wow.
I don't know if
Mm,
we even have the technology or the science to
yeah,
understand that aspect, quite honestly.
yeah.
I will say that a lot of it is a lot of the talk is
Hmm.
a lot of near-death experiencers do complain they have issues with um, not just battery with like watches, but like computers. But it can work the other way too. They can start things. They can
Hmm.
start things as well. But
Hmm.
I haven't known any study to do that. But I can tell you that's the chit chat that I
Hmm.
hear. That's it's like a joke,
Hmm.
and so that goes on. But yeah, I don't believe there has been a study with that. But I'll tell you what's interesting. I don't have an answer for
Yeah,
that.
Journal of Near-Death Studies a few years ago, electrical
Okay.
sensitivity, Dr. Holden, one of the co-authors. All this just basically says what we don't know about near-death experience far outweighs what we do know. There's other exciting discoveries to be made, so stay tuned. Maybe someday we'll understand about this electrical issue.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot of questions. There's still so much to be done, and one of the
Hmm.
things that there's another one big question mark. I don't know. When I'm around other people, they could be a total stranger. I always know if they've had a near death experience because I can
Mm.
feel
Hmm.
that. And I've
Hmm.
actually had one person say they did it. I know they didn't. I didn't
Hmm.
because there's an energy that comes off of them that I feel. What does that mean? I don't know. I can't prove it, but I've never been wrong on that. What
Hmm.
do I sense? It's kind of like a dog sensing another dog, maybe. I don't, not that we're dogs,
Hmm.
but there's something
Hmm.
going on there. Don't really know
Yeah.
what it is. Now you got to
Yeah,
really,
I've heard that before too, Tamara. That's
right,
fascinating.
really? Okay.
It's hard. I'd love that again. That's just why near-death experience research is so wide open. I've heard that a lot, and I would
You
love
have,
to better understand that. I'm sure you
I
would
don't
too.
understand it. I
Yeah,
don't know how
yeah,
that works, but this is, it's one of those, blah, blah, blah. But I can
yeah.
tell. And a lot of times if people have been to the higher level and I get next to them, I get really high and it becomes a little bit of a joke. So what's going on there? I don't know, but that's a whole nother area. Now you've got a really good question here from Will. We've got quite a few coming in. Um,
Yeah.
have NDEs been
Yeah.
consistent throughout history?
Yeah, good question.
Good
The
question.
near-death experiences were first reported extensively, well, at least over 60 of them, by Dr. Raymond Moody in his book Life After Life that was published in 1975. That started the term near-death experience. And so with the awareness of that phenomena, we were able to look retrospectively at reports that go back through history. There's been some reports, I've seen some in the 1600s, 1700s, 1800s. There's been some reports of near-death experience back in medieval era, but again, that's probably very unreliable because they would have been filtered through pretty much the only people who could write at that time, which were members of the clergy. Plato, at the time of Plato, there was a soldier named who reported a near-death experience. We're not 100% sure that that really happened or if this was just a part of the story of that era. But as far as near-death experiences, certainly from my research, we've had people report relatives experience second-person accounts that go back 50, 80 years. And as best we can tell, even with the oldest accounts from the oldest people that share, they're still strikingly similar to current near-death experiences that are shared that happened recently. So as best we can tell, and actually looking at the limited but significant group of centuries old near death experiences, they seem to be strikingly the same. Yes, as best we can tell with limited data.
Now, I don't know if you know this, but I know that people have sent me things in saying, "Oh, well, there's some near-death experiences in biblical times," and I'm like, "Well, I don't know. I guess Lazarus. I mean, but
Yeah.
I guess so, right? There. I guess you
Well,
could call it that. I don't know.
yeah. There. I mean, obviously that's been of interest to the biblical scholars. There was at least one, as Paul said. I believe it was him. Whether I was in heaven or not, or a when. I mean, there's been
That's a
some
good one.
hints of out
Yeah,
of
that's
body experiences. I
good.
don't know that they were near death or anything, but there's certainly, if you look at the Bible carefully, there have certainly been a number of mystical experiences described. Some of them could have been potentially near death experiences. And of course,
Yeah.
Lazarus raised from the dead, although there was no description of an experience while he was observed to be dead. But, heck, coming back from death, that's still pretty awesome. You'll get full credit to Lazarus.
Well, he was out like what 3 days. So I mean,
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure he probably was dead. I mean, I don't know. I haven't heard of an NDE hanging out for 3 days and coming back,
Uh,
but I mean,
yeah. And,
anything's
actually, the other issue too is that back in an era like that, that may have been culturally taboo to share experiences that occurred while you were dead. We still see that as an issue today. For example, I've co-authored papers about non-Western near-death experiencers with my Muslim colleague in Iran. And I've asked him, geez, we don't see a lot of reports of these, non-Western Muslim NDEs seeing Muhammad or other direct historical religious figures in Islam like we do. Jesus is relatively popular in current near-death experiences. He said among Muslims, it would be very frowned, actually taboo, to say that you saw Muhammad. So there may be you have to be aware of cultural context in which people share, and they're not going to risk their neck by sharing things that they think would be taboo, frowned upon, or potentially even endanger them if people don't believe them or consider it to be heresy.
Well, that's true, and that is a common question I get. Why is the Muhammad not showing up, and why is it always Jesus? He's very popular. I saw him twice.
Mhm.
It's because maybe one of those reasons could be they don't want to talk about these things. I understand it could be
Yep.
dangerous. There was a
Yeah.
lady that is a friend of mine that was doing a Linju. She was in India, and she was frowned upon doing NDE research, so she moved to Canada so she could be allowed to do it because it was taboo. So we have
Yeah.
to be very
Yeah.
um, we're very fortunate that we can conduct research now, and people are interested. There's a question here. Um, what percentage of the NDE experiences consider their experience life changing?
Oh, that's good. We had a prior survey or two. We'd asked a question very directly: did your life change specifically as a result of your near-death experience? I don't have those percentages on the tip of my finger, but again, out of hundreds that responded to that, it was in the ballpark of about 95% said their life, probably closer to 95%, if I recall, said their life changed specifically as a result of their near-death experience. So notably, somewhere around 5+% of people say their life didn't change as a result of their near-death experience. Two reasons for that. One, some of these NDEs are from in very early childhood, and how the heck do they know? Because they may remember their near-death experience as the first remembrance of their entire life, so they can't really say that their life changed because their entire life has been in memory of having that near-death experience. And then secondly, there's just people that, because of the environment they're in or their beliefs or how they integrate the near-death experience, they just didn't change anything in their life from it. Those are very unusual, but it does happen. The point being, of course, a great majority of people do have changes, and very often substantial changes when you have a near-death experience.
Wouldn't you say the majority, a vast majority, it does change them? And
Oh
it would
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
and it would probably, I mean, how could it not? At least
Yeah.
change them to question.
Mhm.
Right, and or but you said the higher level ones that have got higher places that have
Yeah.
more detail, that they're,
Mhm.
like, totally convinced there's nothing
Yeah.
you can they're convinced
Mhm.
that life goes on.
Oh,
There
I'm glad you mentioned that. With the most detailed near-death experiences, that we have a research scale called the NDE scale. Those at the very highest number with the most detailed near-death experiences, I checked 48 of those from a recent survey, and not surprisingly, with that detailed of near-death experience, 100% believed in life after death. So again, it's
good news.
proportional to how detailed your near-death experience, how much it impacts your life and changes your beliefs and values.
That is a very good point, and, that's good news for everybody.
Mhm.
It is. Okay, so there was a question, I don't know if I really quite understand it, but it says, it's from Clay. Does this research culturally in any way significant? I guess what he's saying, between different cultures, between
Mhm.
different
Yeah.
continents, does the information come in? Do you find similarity? Does it matter where if you're a human, is that all that counts? I mean, is it different from different places around the world?
Mhm. Okay. Because our website is in, and the questionnaire that we ask, the survey of near death experiences, is in over 30 different languages, we have by far the largest cross cultural study of near death experience that's ever been possible in history. We have hundreds of near death experiences shared in non English language. For my prior research, and I'm going to actually crunch some more recent data on that in the next several
Okay.
weekends, but from looking at the prior data I have that published some years ago, among non-English compared to English-speaking near-death experiences, the content is strikingly similar. We could find no significant difference in the content of near-death experiences there. But the tougher research question is, well, what about comparing typical Western near-death experiences with near-death experiences that occur in non-Western countries, that being countries that are not predominantly Judeo-Christian. And as I mentioned earlier, we have, to my amazement now, over 160 of those. I'm going to start analyzing that. I can tell you, however, we've previously looked at that, and once again, the content of what occurs during near-death experience is strikingly the same, whether you're in a Western country or non-Western country. And in fact, I've published several research papers with my co-author, the Iranian, who studies Muslim near-death experiences in Iran. We just, in the last few weeks, the Journal of Near-Death Studies published our latest article on that, which we found, once again, the content of near-death experiences seems to be strikingly the same, whether you're a Muslim in Iran or anywhere or typical Western near-death experience anywhere in the world. So, Tamara, the bottom line is, based on the best evidence we have, is it doesn't make any difference whether you're a Christian in the United States, a Muslim in, say, Egypt, or a Hindu in India. Anywhere on the planet you have a near-death experience, what occurs, the elements, the characteristics of a near-death experience, remarkably the same.
All right. I know that I did a study with Neil Helm, and I was incognito, which I don't really care. And uh, when I was told that you have much to do, it's not your time, you have much to do. He said that's something that's said a lot. There was a guy that was being eaten by a tiger, and he heard the same thing in his language in Africa. So I don't, I have a little joke. I wonder if God pushes a
Yeah.
button and said, "Okay, this is when we say, not your time. You have much to do right now."
That's great. I
So I
love
guess
it. I love it.
I know you got a lot of cartoons, and we need to have that one.
That's
But
good.
so I'm wondering, from your research, are there common things that are said? Because I'm finding, just out of pure, coincidence, talking to other near-death experiencers, that they are common. Certain things that I find, not always, they're all different, but that the lingo, some of the lingo can be the same. Like that would be an example.
Hmm.
Do
Yeah,
you
I
have
mean,
any?
yeah, there's some fairly, I mean, no two near-death experiences are the same. So, there's some commonalities, but they're all different, at least some non-trivial way in the thousands I've looked at. There can be one of the common things you see near the end of a near-death experience that I think is very revealing is they may be aware of, you need to go back. Your work is not done. You have more to accomplish.
Yep.
So that's a very common sort of final concept they're imparted by some other beings around them, very strongly suggesting that the earthly life we have here is meaningful and purposeful, and there's really some things we do. And by the way, may I add that critical message, you have more to do, has been shared even with people that have had near-death experiences in their 70s, when they're very, very elderly, when they're very sick,
Really?
and they have a limited life
Okay.
expectancy. So again, there seems to be a wisdom that sends them back down to earth, that is thinking, if you will, differently from what we would think in earthly life. Geez, if you've got a fatal illness, you've got a few months to live, or you're very elderly,
Right.
you think that would be less likely, but that's not what the evidence shows. There seems to be that meaning and purpose for all of us, no matter how young we are, no matter how old we are, no matter what our walk in life. We're here for a reason, and it's very important.
So really, that's good news too. So if you
Mhm.
haven't finished your mission, your purpose for being here, that comes up. Why is it,
Mhm.
do you think, that some are given the opportunity to, you can stay, you can go? Now I've heard of
Yeah,
exit
yeah.
points, and maybe you want to speak on that, but why, or some, no, need to go back. You need to,
Yeah.
yeah, you're not done.
Mhm.
And then others, you have that choice. What do you feel about that after
Yeah.
the research?
Well, that's a good question, Tamara. And that comes down to the core question: why do only 10 or 20% of people who nearly die have a near-death experience? And then why do they have the content that they do? Well, once again, the wisdom in near-death experiences is so profound that I think, at least my working belief or hypothesis, if you will, but in answering that important question, came directly from a near-death experiencer. This near-death experiencer was having an overwhelmingly blissful near-death experience, and she was in the presence of and actually interacting with God. And it was such a blissful experience that she asked, I mean, just in an ecstasy, to God, "Why me? Why is this happening to me? Why was I so special?" And God, as I recall, the answer is pretty close to it, if not exact. God's answer, I think, was very revealing about what happens in some NDEs and why some are sent back and some not. The answer to that lady from God was, everyone is special. Love falls on everyone equally. This is what you needed to live your earthly life. And I read that near-death experience, and I went, "Geez, thank you." Here I am trying to learn about this, and I didn't figure that out on my own, but I get it, because that was, I think, exactly what's going on here. I mean, near-death experiences are an encounter with a wisdom vastly greater, way greater than our earthly everyday life wisdom. And that's just a microcosm of the amazing wisdom that can be shared in near-death experiences. And that, when I shared it with other near-death experience researchers, I think that's now, at least in the minds of many now, the working hypothesis as to why some people have near-death experiences and some don't. Some are sent back involuntarily and some don't. That seems to be a lot to do with it right there, what I just shared.
Well, and that leads me to my next. This is my personal question I want to get in because of my own selfish NDE reasons, and that is multiple. Well, you've established that that helps them on their spiritual path. I mean, you do get a download. I mean, you do, and there's some benefits. There are some benefits you come back with.
Mhm.
It's like the $6 million man's. You come back a little better sometimes.
Yeah.
So, so why is it with multiple NDErs that they? Uh, agree to this, and what do you see any differences with them? Is there an agreement you think that's set up ahead of time?
Yeah. I mean, we don't know. I mean, that's a
It's just
tough
a
question.
guess.
Yeah, we're back to that. What we don't
Right.
know about near-death experience exceeds what we do know. So anything I say on that particular issue, multiple near-death experiences, would be highly speculative. I think what we can speak to from evidence is that, and this is overwhelmingly clear in near-death experiences, is that we had an existence before our earthly life. All lines of evidence suggest we actually chose to come here in our earthly life. We were in our pre-earthly life existence far more smart, aware, conscious, and we made a very informed decision to come down here. So there may be that wisdom, that plan, there may be that agreement that we made in coming here that we don't know, we can't remember, we're not supposed to, that may have had something to do with multiple near-death experiences. I mean, maybe it's just that insight, that special wisdom that was especially important for you and other people that have had multiple near-death experiences. So again, that's speculative, but I could say one thing pretty for sure, and that is there's a reason. Whenever anything in our earthly life, any of these near-death experiences, it absolutely seems to be, even if we don't understand it and may never understand it in our life, I can say deep down, we're going to know after we die that we're going to have a better understanding. I know it's too late then. That bugs me too, but there is a reason.
Well, no, that makes a lot of sense. Really, everything there's a reason, and
Mhm.
that will be known because I'm sure that's definitely come up in your research. But I even think that with near death experience, I've had people like laugh when they've mentioned. I was like, and I don't know why. Maybe they're uncomfortable with that. It is what it is. But I think that we agree on some level to certain things. I don't
Yeah,
know if it's directly. It's just a hypothesis. There's no way to know. But like people
yeah.
say, "Oh, but I agreed to be here to be abused or to get cancer." Well, no, but maybe you
Mm,
agreed to learn humility. I don't know,
yeah,
but we didn't know the
yeah.
form. So we've got some more great questions.
Mhm.
This is a big one. Have there been any negative ND experiences where the experience was affected in a negative way?
Mhm.
So you want to talk about that one?
Sure. In the scholarly literature, we don't call them negative near-death experiences. They're referred to as distressing or
Just
frightening. There's two ways to conceptualize the distressing or frightening near-death experiences. One of them is subjectively distressing, and that means they had an emotion of fear during the near-death experience, and it isn't necessarily what you think. The example I use here is a person they coded, they were being rushed to the hospital, and they had a near-death experience in the ambulance. Consciousness rose above the ambulance, and angels appeared to them as they were rushing along to the hospital, and these consciousnesses above the roof of the ambulance. So angels appear, and they frightened him. So he was sitting here batting at the angels because he was scared. Okay, well, that's subject. I know You see everything. Okay, you have thousands of NDEs. You'll see everything at least once. So
Oh,
that's, but you got to understand, at least in the big picture, that's subjectively frightening. I think most people,
I
great
got it.
majority, would
It's
be frightened.
personal.
Other people are frightened about what they call a void. Substantial majority are not frightened. They call it sort of a loving darkness enveloping awareness. Other people early on in that out of body experience may be frightened to be apart from their body. Usually, the subjectively frightening near death experiences don't say subjectively frightening the whole NDE. But most of the time, they develop into, especially when they're at unearthly or heavenly realm, they become non-frightening and actually they share that strong sense of bliss and peace and love. You don't forget the number two word is a descriptor of near-death experiences in their own language is love. So typically even the distressing experiences become love. Okay, what
Okay.
about objectively frightening NDEs such as hellish realms? They are very, very
Yeah,
rare.
I know people want to know about that. I know.
Yeah, that's
Sorry,
a
we're gonna have to talk
that's
about,
popular.
but from the South, we should say hail. So can you
Yeah,
talk
hail.
about hail?
Okay. That is a little bit. I even with 3,000 over 3,500 near-death experiences, I was, if you use very strict criteria for it being a near-death experience with hellish content, a couple flavors on that. They can either be aware of at a distance a hellish realm. Typically, they're in an unearthly heavenly realm, and they see a realm in which the being with them tells them you don't want to go there. It is a distinct boundary separated
Okay.
away from heaven. And that tends to be, an awareness of it, if you will, in passing. So when people say there cannot possibly be a hell in heaven, they are absolutely correct. From that external observation, it is completely discrete and separated from the rest of heaven. And then other people are actually a part of that, and they've described all sorts of hellish, demonic sounds, smells, stuff that's frightening. I
Mhm.
want to emphasize on that as scary as the objectively frightening near death experiences can be, there is a silver lining. People may call out to God, Jesus, to be rescued, and they generally are. So it seems to be you have that connection, that ability to leave that hellish realm if you want to. As best I can tell, people get in that hellish realm not because they're involuntarily sent there by somebody for whatever reason. It seems that those beings are there because they are around other beings that are there, who they want to be with, who they feel connected to. So, in other words, these are people that are
Yes.
themselves so malevolent and evil that that is paradoxically their heaven, to be in that frightening, disgusting realm that we recognize as hell, but to them it's their heaven because they're in the other beings around them that are like them, the evil, malevolent, and they don't have to be known in their heavenly realm as malevolent beings because they don't have to. There's no one around to do that. So that's another important point too. I don't think there's any major near-death experience researcher that believes in a permanent involuntary hell, including me.
Right.
And then lastly, very quickly, people after a hellish near-death experience can very commonly have a very positive life changes. They understand it's not a threat to them, and they'll commonly say there was no other way I could learn those lessons other than to have that experience like that. And that can be the impetus for them to grow spiritually and be loving people. And they recognize that was the path they had to go through. It's like a dark night of the soul that has been in the descriptor and for centuries of especially Christian writing.
One thing I'll add to that from a totally mystical point, I had, I channeled Jesus. That's who I saw over there. And I asked him about this hell business. And he
Mhm,
said, what you said. Isn't it
mhm,
nice that it was similar? He said people go to where their mindset is, and if the and I said, what about this hell business? And he is it real? He said, well, if they want to still carry on in spirit and do these things that they've done, they're like to be around other people like them.
mhm.
He said, but I offer my love to them all the time, and they can always
Yeah,
leave.
you can
But
always
when
leave.
they do this, I didn't look at it this way, but he's saying that it's their form of pleasure.
Mhm.
Some
Yeah.
people like that and go with
Mhm,
other people like them. They go to the tone level of where they are.
mhm,
Then he gave me an example of a party. You go to a party, you go to a social event. Don't you
mhm.
kind of drawn to the people that are the
Yeah.
most fun or whatever that's like you? And he
Mhm,
said that it's like that on the other side too. So I thought that was
mhm.
cute. But that's what
That's
basically
what it is.
he answered exactly what you said.
Right. And two other real quick points on that that are very important. So in hellish realms, as best I can tell from the best evidence, people choose to be there. It's not a matter of them being sentenced there, but it is a matter of choice, typically very bad choices that ultimately lead them to be a part of that. The second thing that not many people talk about with the observation of hellish realms in the afterlife is that is the single most powerful line of evidence that we have free will in the afterlife. We have free will that is so powerful and so complete that even in the afterlife, we can choose to literally separate ourselves from God and be in hell. I think there's no better line of evidence that we really do have free will, not only here on earth, but in the afterlife as well.
It's true, and it's funny, but coming from the South, I'm in North Carolina, in the Carolinas. When someone's on their deathbed, they usually run in. This is kind of a funny thing. They run in and they try to convert them real quick to Jesus. But it's
Yeah,
funny. Isn't that funny?
yeah,
That's a Southern thing.
yeah, that
But
happens. Yeah,
they have, but they have free will. You have free will to go over. You have free will to go on with your journey, and it's never too late for people. I don't care how horrible they were in life.
yeah,
It's
I
never
agree.
too late. So,
Yeah,
we've got some really good people. Or you got people really thinking on things. Yes, it is
I'll
very
bet
comforting.
you.
They've got people really going.
Oh,
Um,
I'm going to take that comment. That's very comforting and run with it. The message of near death experiences of an overwhelmingly wonderful afterlife for all of us is, I think, that is the most important, powerful, positive concept that humankind could possibly be aware of. Is that we don't really end, you, me, our friends, family, and loved ones, everybody on the planet, that there really is that afterlife, that we are all loved enormously by God, that we're all connected and a part of that greater picture of the afterlife. I
yes.
cannot conceive of any more important, more valuable message for our earthly life than that right there. And that's powerfully evidence based from near death experiences.
Well, you wrote a book, God in the Afterlife.
Mhm.
So has this turned you more into like
Mhm.
a believer and more spiritual yourself?
Yeah, God, what we have in the book, God in the Afterlife, where I studied over
Mhm.
270 near death experiencers are aware of or encountered God. That I think is, in my estimation, the most powerful evidence for the reality of God that has been presented on Earth over and over. Near-death experiencers very consistently describe what they're encountering when they use the term God. Now, I emphasize they over and over say God is a human word, and this what I encountered, while we can call it God, is far beyond human language or any descriptor that exists in our earthly life. It's far way above and beyond that. So, given the awareness of our limitation of language of describing what they encountered, over and over they describe that light is very commonly described: beautiful, mystical, bright light, love beyond anything they knew on earth, complete acceptance from God, acceptance of who they are, everything they are, and all that they are, even surprising a lot of people who thought they would be judged. Essentially, never judgment from God in any way. Overwhelmingly blissful, positive encounters. So that's phenomenally good news for anybody that ever had any concerns about afterlife and God being there. That's you don't want to miss God. That's very good
No,
news.
I'm looking forward to that. I'm not
Yeah.
missing that.
Mhm.
And
Oh,
so, and I can't wait to hang out and skip around with Jesus again.
yeah,
That was good stuff.
yeah, that, yeah.
And so
I've
that
noticed.
was
I've
some
seen. Yeah, I've got
love.
over 100. Yes, join the club. I've been studying that, and that is, you are correct. That's
Uh,
extremely good. You,
good
I'm
stuff.
saddened when people encounter Jesus,
Mm.
worry they're going to be judged. Ain't going to happen. Jesus loves you beyond
Oh my
anything that you
gosh.
can imagine, and it's the most
Oh my
powerful
gosh.
sense of love imaginable. And it's interesting because Jesus,
Mm.
I conceptualize Jesus would say, "Verily I say unto you," and preach some dang sermon. The number one thing I've seen is Jesus wants to listen. He wants to hear you. He wants to be with you, and that's what's just so awesome about Jesus' near-death experience. That's the real Jesus.
Okay, well, here's the thing, and I'll say this, I'll own it, and we'll come back to that. He
Yeah.
talks to me like and over there like a friend, he's funny, he's
Mhm.
got a sense of humor, but he's
Yeah.
not portrayed like that here.
Mhm.
Let's
Yeah.
see.
All true.
Yeah, and as you said that, I was getting high. He stepped forward. I'm like, "We have a guest here tonight." Jesus, he just showed up, and he sees your work that you're doing, and so, so proud.
Mhm.
Okay, so let me go back here, and that is a non-denominational religious thing I just said.
Yeah.
That's an experience thing that I felt, okay?
Yeah.
All right, so, so this God is big, the source,
Mhm.
this big,
Mhm.
all-loving creator thing. Why do you think it's always
Yeah.
explained with love, light, and this sense of unity?
Mhm. Yeah. Well, because I think all of that is there. One thing you see overwhelmingly in near-death experiences, especially the more detailed ones, is they have a strong sense that we're all unity. We are literally all one with everything, and that includes with God. And that took me a long time to grasp. I had to see that probably over 100 times before I just said, okay, that's not intuitively obvious. I didn't understand or believe that, but that's based on evidence, very strong evidence. So we do seem to have that unity or oneness in the afterlife in near death experiencers described that is extremely not obvious in our earthly life. So there's your question, that light, love, and unity. Well, that's all, if you will, a manifestation of God. God is love, literally the most powerful force of
Mhm.
love in the universe, and that light. So, given that all of this is a part of, if you will, a manifestation of God, as we all are, well, no surprise. These are all descriptors of God. Anything in the afterlife is literally a part of God.
It is, and we are, and we've forgotten. It's a bit
Yeah.
sad. Um,
Well, that's what we're supposed to. I don't. I used to feel bad about that, but yeah, I totally get in our earthly life we're supposed to forget that, and that's okay. That's part
yeah,
of our lessons down
yeah,
here. Because we don't forget, the earthly life, Tamara, is the tiniest slice of our eternal existence. So this is an exceptionally rare part of our overall eternal existence, is to have this sense that we're not aware of or a part of God. So it's important to learn lessons. It's sort of like, as one near-death experiencer said, it's the boot camp of our spiritual existence. So just remember exactly what we know, and that'll help provide the encouragement to get through our earthly life and on into the afterlife.
or another way to look at it could be that we come into this world like, God, what? Who are we? We're
Mhm.
nothing, that we don't live forever. We're just this tiny little
Mhm.
thing. And then it would be the greatest love story ever to see
Mhm.
we're part of something and that
Yeah.
we are so loved and God loves us and we're so, what a great love story. So
Yeah.
we've got here has got this is from ES has God imparted a specific date or event to near deathers within the last decade that pertains to current times we're in. I don't know if I understand that question. Just answer it the best. Does God s-
Yeah.
sorry
Well, I
share
can tell you,
that?
this is sort of interesting. Um, so over several decades ago, renowned NDE researcher Dr. Kenneth Ring wrote the book Heading
Yes.
for Omega, and in that he had a number of near-death experiencers who, and did it just right. He said, "This is a hypothesis. We can't be certain about this." But there seemed to be a number of near-death experiencers that converged on the belief that in, I think it was 1988, there would be an Earth change event. Well, 1988 came and went, and I think it was pretty much the consensus of everybody that there was no Earth change event that occurred then. So that is a huge cautionary note for people trying to read between the lines and near death experiences and come up with a sense that we have some idea about some major change predicted by near death experiences. I've actually asked directly, did you become aware of future events? And so I have a huge amount of data on that. But the
Hmm.
bottom line is, I don't think we know. There's no consistency in those answers. There's no awareness of what's going to happen in the future. And I think we see more consistently that what lies in the future is going to be a product of ours and other people's choices or
Right.
naturally occurring events in the world. So I would say, after having carefully considered that, times asking hundreds of near-death experiences, we really don't know.
I would agree with you, and I know a lot of very quality, top level psychic medium channelers around the world.
Mhm.
And even as we stand, it's very hard for them to get information now. And I think they said that is changing a lot. But what I do
Mhm.
get all the time, and they get, is we're in control, and we need to be positive and prayers and love and love one another, and that's the change. So I get that
Mhm.
consistently. So now, okay, we have another question by Clay. Are NDE
Yeah,
experiences sometimes, in your estimation, tailored to that
yeah,
specific personality, the experience, or meaning, are they shown specific things where
yeah.
they can handle when it's spoken to them in the way they understand?
Yeah, absolutely. I've talked about the content of near-death experiences being strikingly consistent. Tunnel, feelings of peace and love, light, afterlife realms, other deceased beings, life review, encountering deceased loved ones, unearthly realms. These are all the elements of it. But of course, there's going to be content that is specific to them. For example, I've just studied very recently near-death experiences in very young children. And we had, geez, I don't know, like over 60. And so the content would often be tailored to them. They were more often going to be with a loving presence, like a
Yeah.
parent. They were going to be, even though they seem to often think in an accelerated fashion far beyond their average age, which my study was only 3.5 years old, they still seem to be more. It was attuned toward them, as if they were a child. There was a little more caution not to be frightening. It was just more a relationship that you would expect with a very young child. Certainly if you live in a Pacific island and you've never seen a tunnel in your life, you're probably not going to see a tunnel. So there's things that are sort of affected by the near-death experiences seem to be a blend, or a better term would be co-creation of the person having the near-death experience, some vastly greater intelligence. And so it's not surprising that while the characteristics of near-death experience are the same, I mean, like when you see a deceased loved one, it's not going to be somebody else's deceased loved one. It's yours. It's your relative. It's a person you knew in your earthly life and died. When you encounter a deceased beloved pet in a near-death experience, well, that was your dog that died. That was not Joe Blow's
Sure.
across the
Specific
continent
to
that
you.
died. So there's certainly, not surprisingly, some content that is specifically and meaningful to the person having the near-death experience, while there's sort of that global characteristics of what occurred, certainly the strikingly consistent spiritual wisdom of near-death experiences that you see everywhere, and regardless of age of near-death experiencer.
Okay, so that's irregardless. When is
Yeah.
that study with the children coming out?
I'll give it a few months. I'm cranking out a lot of
Hey,
research. Yep,
I've had
yep.
I've had 5 of them there, so if
Mhm.
you need anyone,
I'm
and
your
they're very detailed. Okay,
Yeah.
so here we go.
Mhm.
I got a question that we didn't cover that I think would be really helpful to everyone. Um, Here we go, and it's about a life review.
Mhm.
So, can you tell us what a life review is and what it generally might contain?
Sure. First of all, thank you for asking that, because we're going through a lot of near-death experience jargon, and if you got a question on it, just shoot
Yeah.
a question and we'll address it. A life review occurs in around 15 or 20% of near-death experiences, and again, this is something I did in the last couple weekends. I looked over our series again. So what it is a review of a portion or even all of your prior life. Now, this shows the incredible acceleration of consciousness that is so often observed in near-death experiences. Most of them describe their level of consciousness and alertness during their near-death experience as greater than that they had during their earthly everyday life. And sometimes I have to pinch myself and say, geez, they're unconscious or clinically dead, and yet here they are with greatly accelerated thinking. But even though they may be unconscious literally for minutes, they may review a portion, or yes, true, literally all of their prior life. Visualizing their prior life is variably described. They may, one of the more common descriptors is they see it like on a movie screen. There may be different panels. They may see different aspects of their life in different going on, flashing. The light, you can go forward chronologically through your life. Occasionally you hear it backwards. At other times it seems to be, seemingly, I call it random, but it isn't. Scenes from your life at different chronological times. Occasionally, people have the ability to zoom in and see further details of the life or study it in more detail. If there's another being around them when they do a life review, essentially never is there any external judgment. So when I started talking about near-death experience down here in the Deep South, immediately a line formed up after my interview, and people said, I've done things I'm not proud of. So we have to reassure people. True story. So I immediately said, "There's no external judgment. There just
Uh,
isn't." The
yeah.
life review is, oh, it was, you wouldn't believe the look. I said when I was giving that talk, I looked at the faces of people. It's like, what? What am I saying? Well, they were scared of the life review. Don't be afraid of the life review. It's
My
all good.
goodness.
In fact, it's actually one of the most powerful learning things that you can do. I mean, you're actually seeing all of your prior life. As my study, I found that even if they were aware of things in early childhood that they long forgot about, if they go back and check with their parents, it actually happened, even though they'd forgotten about it from early childhood. So what they're seeing and what they're aware of is real. Occasionally, we see the so-called panoramic life reviews where they're not on, these are relatively rare, but they're not only aware of their prior life, but amazingly, if they're interacting with another person, they see and feel the interaction from the perspective of the other person, what that person was thinking, what that person was feeling, and often to their substantial surprise. So this is, extremely informative when people have that. Life reviews are not only an example of the overwhelming acceleration of consciousness, but they're also some of the best evidence we have that our conscious experience, what we're remembering, who we are, doesn't die. It seems to be retained verbatim in some kind of collective consciousness, which is
Wow.
fascinating. Again, don't forget we're all unified and connected, and that's a pretty excellent example of it right there in the life reviews and being aware of what other people felt when you interacted with them.
Well, what really hit me was many years ago, 25 years ago or so, I read Dr. What is it? Danny and Brinkley's book,
Mm-hmm.
Saved by the Light with Dr. Raymond Moody. And he was talking about experiencing it from the other person's perspective and how
Mm-hmm.
he realized how much he had hurt people and he came
Yeah.
back and wanted to change. And I think that really hit home. I mean, what a learning lesson to see how you've hurt people or what people have said. Now,
Uh-huh.
I want to, I know
But
we're getting
before we lose sight of that, real quickly, an important point from those type of near-death experiences, they're very often surprised that sometimes the littlest thing they did, a little act of kindness, things that you'd forget about or not think were important, they would see how that would affect the other person. You'd have that ripple effect of how it positively influenced who they interacted with, and that led them to reach out more lovingly to people around them. So it's rather remarkable that this so-called little act of love in our earthly life really isn't little. Every time we reach out lovingly, compassionately, it's a big deal, and it may be much bigger of a deal than you could ever possibly recognize.
I agree. Just to add on to that, because it's so odd, I'll mention it. I did a reading, and a guy, and somebody kept coming through. I said, I don't know, he won't leave. But the man, basically, the story was this man that I was in front of, very nice person. He had someone trying to reach out to him. It was someone wanting to thank him. I said, I'm a municipality building. You go every 2 weeks. Bottom line, it ended up being the place he would get his. It was severance. He was in between jobs, and the guy, what he
Mhm.
said is he was a recluse. He lived alone with his cat. He had no family, and he looked forward to this man talking twice a month because he was so kind to him, and he
Wow.
was his only contact. I mean, it was really touching. I was like, oh my god. He was his only contact. He goes, oh, it took a while. And he goes, oh my God, he's the guy at the so and so building. And
Great.
he came to
Mhm.
say, thank
Yeah.
you for your kindness. And then I realized, oh my gosh, every little act we do, moving over on the bus or doing every little thing, all that matters.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Wow. Thanks for sharing that, Tamara. That's very touching and certainly very real from my study and near death experience. Wow.
yeah.
Food for thought for all of us.
Yeah, occasionally a couple things come up like that and they're random and you realize the impact we really make. So tell people, I know we're toward, and I mean, you're just fantastic. I can't say enough. I want everybody to buy Dr. Jeffery Long's books. And so go to Amazon and then also follow him on that. And I'm gonna put the website here and it will be at the bottom. But tell us you're coming up. You're going to be at the Contact at the Desert conference, which
Mhm.
is online. And
Mhm.
I don't. You want to talk about anything that's coming up? You're doing?
Yeah, we're talking about surprisingly near-death experiences, but heck, you've all heard about that tonight, so you have a pretty good idea about, actually a fairly deep and interesting look into that. The other thing I'm going to do is the workshop is going to be consciousness and near-death experiences. So we're going to get into a lot of what you heard already, that acceleration of consciousness, the supernormal senses. I'll have a guest on that show who, during their near-death experience, I thought this would be of interest to those folks contacting the desert. During her near death experience, she had very detailed, direct visualization and actually interaction with life on planets around the universe, several of them, with different life. So we'll have her on,
Cool.
Sandy, and that should be. I was dang interested, so it's that'll be part of the special workshop for Contact in the Desert. But heck, you don't have to pay for the regular talk I'm doing a Contact in the Desert. You just heard it. So there you go. Save your
Right,
money.
and you've got one before this, the whole entire, basically PowerPoint of an overview
Yeah.
of the study.
Yeah.
So,
You've got it. You've heard it all. You don't need to go to that. Yeah, you're right. That is a good, the PowerPoint's pretty good.
it's
So
really good. It's really
yeah.
good, guys. You need to see that. It's the one before this. If you haven't, it's really,
Mhm.
really good. And yeah, and it's funny. I wasn't going to say anything since you mentioned it. There's a couple little things I want to mention them before we close out. Is I have heard people that have had not a life review, but life's review, and other people on other
Yeah.
planets. And then, which leads me to, if you want to, we just kind of just to put a mention out there to really blow everybody's mind because you think you're done, but oh wait a minute, the
Yeah.
research that you're doing with Ray Hernandez with the
Mhm.
what is it, the consciousness
Mhm.
uh, and
Yeah.
how
Contact consciousness is
Contact Consciousness
basically.
Foundation, how the near death experience works in with the alien contact, works in with spirit communication, works in with they're seeing all these things converge. So
Mhm.
you're a part of that
Mhm.
uh, that group
Mhm.
too.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
Ray Hernandez has got a 2-volume book. I've seen it. It's just mind-boggling how amazingly it's gonna literally set the standard for discussing these kinds of contact intelligences from a variety of different scholarly perspectives. So stay tuned. That'll be out. I think it's going to be out probably later this year, but that's going to be a
Okay.
big book. But what books? 2 of them, but well worth the read.
So you're in that book.
Mhm.
Correct? Okay,
That's,
good.
that's right.
Okay, oh, but finally, we have okay, the shy ones coming out. We got the shy people coming out. Thanking you. Thank you, Donna.
Oh,
We had
okay.
a lot of very e energetic, very active people here tonight that, I you know, especially that we had a really, prominent NDE or a lot of people watch, but they're shy. That's okay. I'm just happy that they're here and they're able to hear from you because there's some people that are very skeptical and closed-minded, and
Mhm.
you are the perfect person to listen to because you have done the research and
Mhm.
being a medical doctor, you have been around, you have seen probably experienced firsthand or not, well, shared near death experiences, which is a whole nother topic we don't
Another
have
topic.
time
Yeah.
on. But thank you
Mhm.
so much for your time tonight, and I'll put your information below so people can get a hold of. I'll look at your website,
Mhm.
buy Dr. Jeffery Long's books, and stay connected to. You're doing all sorts of stuff. You're on TV all the time, so
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 kind of, yeah.
you have a busy schedule between being at the medical hospital and then going into right into to
Mhm.
interviews. Thank you for being so gracious to be here tonight on the Seeking Heaven channel.
Mhm.
I feel a lot of gratitude and appreciation for you and for what you're doing. Because
Oh, thank
without you, I feel like my story goes flat. So thanks for
you.
validating all of us into years.
Oh, well, my pleasure, Tamara. This has been a great show. I'm sure appreciate everybody's interest through all this show. We really, I think, covered some fascinating material, and just remember how loved you all are. Just remember that there's light at the end of the tunnel. And again, thanks again for all your interest. And Tamara, this was awesome. Great questions from the audience too. I
Yeah,
love. Oh,
great
cool.
audience, great
Yeah.
audience. They're so
Mhm.
inquisitive. God bless you all, and thank you so much, and much praise to you and your work as you continue on. I can't wait to see what's next with you.
Mhm.
Thank you so much, Dr. Long.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Have
guys.
a good night, all.
Take care. See you next week, guys. Bye bye.
Take care. Bye.